Yo!
Yes!
Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back. We got a special deck tech here for you today. It's Tevesh, Kodama, Doom, Hulk. I've themed this after MF Doom and Dr. Doom because those are fucking dope. There's actually in the primer. This deck actually has no primer. The primer is actually just the MF Doom song. It's food. You should listen to that. I don't want to get copywritten or anything, so take a look here. It is explosive, grindy Golgari Hulk deck, which is very different from Varol's and Grist, because Varol's is the higher end of the spectrum, which is very fast, but not very resilient or grindy. But Tevesh and Kodama meet right in the middle, and they have the best of both worlds. So we got Tevesh Zot, Doom of Fools. It is a legendary Planeswalker Zot for 4 and a black. It has a +2 loyalty ability. It says create 2/0/1 black throw creature tokens, which is very relevant in this deck, honestly. You would think they're not very relevant because there's other cards in the deck that sacrifice creatures to draw cards. We're going to be sacrificing a lot of creatures for advantage. It's also noted as a aristocrat strategy because if you like aristocrats and casual commander, you probably pick up this deck, which is super fun. And it also has a +1. It says you may sacrifice another creature or planeswalker. If you do, draw 2 cards, then draw another card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. So at bare minimum, if you sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker, you will be drawing 2 cards at bare minimum. Yeah, so the +1 is also a sacrifice outlet for the actual main combo of the deck, which is Protean Hulk. Protean Hulk is the main, or I wouldn't say the main, it is one of the premier cards in the deck. You can use Tevesh's +1 to sacrifice it and then get your combo going. And then Tevesh Zot also has a -10, the ultimate. It says gain control of all commanders, put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. With this ability, this is a great distraction because you're also running ad nauseum in your deck. If you put Tevesh down, people are going to attack Tevesh instead of your life total because they don't want their commanders stolen for free on incremental value. And the thing is, people are going to start swinging at your Tevesh. And Tevesh already creates 2 black thralls, so they can block. However, can't block a Crom, but that's where Kodama comes in. Kodama can block a Crom. You can make sure Tevesh just goes back to the command zone, and then Tevesh will come back in because it puts all commanders onto the battlefield under your control. And it gets it kind of quick, actually, if you just make 2 thralls each turn. Starts at 4 if you do thralls for 3 turns. On your 4th turn, then you can just take everybody's commander, and it's probably GG. Not really GG, because if you take everybody's commander, usually their commander isn't very essential. Maybe if you're playing against like a Magda or something like that, then maybe they're just shut out of the game. But for the most part, everybody has a backup win condition. And it's also paired with Kodama of the East Tree, which is a 4 green legendary creature spirit, 6/6 with reach, and it says whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield, which is kind of insane. I've heard this has been a terror in casual EDH. It's just way too much value for most casual EDH players to get around, and they can't beat it because it's huge. It's a 6/6 and it has reach, so if you know if they want to swing at you with their with their Croms, it just swats it out of the air. Like I said, Tevesh Zot is a good distraction from your life total if you're playing ad nauseum, which you will be. You can take a very, very shallow ad nauseum and be able to cast and play almost all of the spells out of your hand with Kodama, and that's the reason why we play it. And at the bare minimum, at its floor, you can play lands. You can play extra lands. So say you have your Kodama in play, right? So at bare minimum, after your ad nauseum, you can take a very shallow ad nauseum, like I said. You can play your Bloodstained Mire with Kodama out, and once you play your Bloodstained Mire, that's going to trigger Kodama. And then once you have a Kodama trigger, you can put a permanent into play that's equal or lesser value. So Bloodstained Mire's converted mana cost of 0. You can put in a Marsh Flats. Marsh Flats comes into play. And then once you fetch with your Bloodstained Mire, maybe grab a Swamp, then that's going to trigger Kodama again. And then you can put your Polluted Delta into play. And then you can fetch with your Polluted Delta, get a Bayou. That's going to trigger Kodama. And that's going to put your Emergent Zone into play. And also, oh my god, you didn't fetch with your Marsh Flats. You can fetch with it again, get an Overgrown Tomb, and then pop your Gaia's Cradle into play. You've gained a tremendous amount of mana here. And that's just off of you fetching after an ad nauseum. So you can take very shallow ad nauseums. You can do an ad nauseum for maybe like 15 or 20, and you'll be fine because you'll be able to play most of the things you have. You know, if you play a Lotus Petal, that'll put a fetch land into play. It's the reason why you're running a bunch of swamps here. You're running 3 swamps, 3 forests. It's usually more than most basics than cEDH decks would run because they're usually on a Tainted Pact mana base because they want to cast a Tainted Pact as a tutor. This deck's not looking to play Tainted Pact as a tutor. It's just looking to play fetches and, you know, chain each and every single fetch to ramp up mana. As far as fetching goes, you have Lotus Cobra. Lotus Cobra is a 1 and a green snake. It's a 2/1 that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. If you play like a Windswept Teeth, Lotus Cobra will trigger and it'll add you 1 mana of any color. Then you can fetch. The land will enter, then it'll give you 1 mana of any color. Then you can tap the said land to give you 1 mana of the fetch colored land. So that's basically a Black Lotus. Your fetches turn into Black Lotus when the Lotus Cobra is out.
Facts.
And as you can tell right now, this deck's looking to make a lot of mana. The reanimation effects in this deck are abundant, and they're always going to come. You're going to draw at least 1 each game. At minimum, you're definitely going to draw 1. So there's been times where I've actually sacrificed Kodama to draw 3 cards, and then, you know, cast a reanimate to put it back in play. But the thing is, you're really looking to sacrifice is a Protean Hulk. If you don't know, Protean Hulk is a 5 and a green beast, 6/6. Whenever Protean Hulk is put into a graveyard from play, search your library for any number of creature cards with total converted mana cost 6 or less. Put them into play, then shuffle your library. This probably looks familiar if you've seen the Z&D deck tech that me and Emmett did before. I'll link it, or I'll pop something up here. It's looking to put one pile into play because I believe this is the most efficient pile you can run in Golgari. It's looking to put in Viscera Seer, Lesser Masticore, Malira, Sylvok, Outcast, Disciple of the Vault. So this is the classic Golgari Hulk pile. There is no better Hulk pile. Unless you want to use multiple cards over, you know, a span of multiple Hulk triggers, you can do that. But this is the most efficient Hulk pile that you can run in these colors. And once your Hulk is sacrificed, you just grab these 4 cards and then boom, you're just winning the game. So how it works is you'll have these 4 cards into play. You'll have a Viscera Seer into play, which you can sacrifice your Lesser Masticore to. The thing is about Lesser Masticore, it has persist, so whenever it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. The thing is, Malira, Sylvok Outcast says creatures you control can't have -1/-1 counters placed on them. So, whenever you sacrifice the Lesser Masticore, It comes back into play without any -1/-1 counters, and you can continually sacrifice it over and over again, and it'll never get those -1/-1 counters, which then loops back into Disciple of the Vault, which says whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may have the target opponent lose 1 life, unless their Master Core is an artifact. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Instead of grabbing Melira and Master Core, you can just grab Activated Sleeper and maybe some random 2-drop or so. You can sacrifice it to Viscera Seer, and then you can go grab your Body Launderer, and you grab the Melira. So now you have a infinite sacrifice loop between Lesser Master Core and Melira, which will trigger Body Launderer, because Body Launderer says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Body Launderer connives, which means you're going to draw a card and discard a card, and you're going to draw a card and discard a card. You can loot through your whole deck if you wanted. Again, like, I don't know why you would, because it doesn't win you the game on the spot, but you can empty your whole deck if you want. Maybe you could play Yawgmoth's Will, maybe you could play Praetor's Grasp, and, you know, take somebody's Thassa's Oracle and just win the game like that. This deck is highly customizable, but right now, the way that I have it, the slots are tight. Kodama sees every single permanent that you put into play. So if you cast your Elves of Deep Shadow, and then you can pop in a Deathrise Shaman off a Kodama trigger, which is really, really nifty. I originally had Razakath in the deck, which I swapped for Hoarding Broodlord. The reason why Razakath was in the deck was because when you could pop the Razakath into play, and you had a Kodama trigger, you could sacrifice another creature with the Kodama trigger on the stack, and then you could sacrifice it, and then you could put the Protean Hulk into your hand, and then you resolve the Kodama trigger because Razakath is 8 and Protean Hulk is 7. You could just pop Protean Hulk into play, and then once Protean Hulk's in play, you can sacrifice it to Razakath's ability, and then you can get your Hulk pile going off. I recently swapped it for Hoarding Broodlord because I originally had the Eternal Witness in the deck, and I had Saw in Half, so I could run a Saw in Half loop. That is also one of the 1-win conditions if you're so lucky to get it together. Is a Eternal Witness, Saw in Half, and Culling the Weak loop, where you net even on mana, and then you can continually sacrifice Eternal Witness to itself and make copies of Eternal Witness. You can make infinite copies of Eternal Witness at instant speed, but regardless, I already had that combo in the deck, and Hoarding Broodlord is the biggest hotness right now. The cool thing about playing this deck is that Tevesh makes 0/1 Thralls, which can then make your Hoarding Broodlord easier to hardcast because the Thralls are black. So they can tap and, cast your Hoarding Broodlord for a lot cheaper than it normally would have been. It also can help pay for some of the convoke costs. You have an ETB trigger to search your library, which then gets Saw in Half. Then you can convoke your Hoarding Broodlord, and you can convoke 2 other creatures to cast your Saw in Half, targeting Hoarding Broodlord. Then Hoarding Broodlord makes 2 copies of itself, which then create 2 ETBs, and then you get 2 search triggers on the stack. One Hoarding Broodlord's supposed to get a sacrifice, the other's supposed to get a Peer into the Abyss. You can tap your 1 Hoarding Broodlord for the convoke cost to cast a sacrifice, sacrificing itself, making you 8 mana, which then pays for the Peer into the Abyss, which is 7, and you'll float 1 black. And then you can draw half your deck, and then GG, win the game. This also works with Ad Nauseam. I've also ran Bowls of Citadel at one point. You can also get Bowls of Citadel if you're feeling froggy for that. I also learned through a very, very large Twitter post that, I actually played in the Playing with Power server, and I was about to win the game with the Hoarding Broodlord, and somebody flashes in the opposition agent. And I was like, okay, yeah, you got me. And he searches the library for my second win condition, which is Chain of Smog and Witherbloom Apprentice. And he exiles those 2 cards after the Saw in Half. And somebody asked, hey, for as long as those cards remain in exile, you can play it. So, you could play those cards, right? And then that was a whole discussion. I'll probably link to the Twitter feed as well. Show a bunch of screenshots. It was a very large uproar in the community for this ruling. Nobody knows how it works, honestly. In my opinion, although I've got a lot of really good answers and a lot of good answers from judges, in my personal opinion, I don't think anybody knows how this works. I originally thought that once it entered, that opposition agent would replace the search, which then overrides the Hoarding Broodlord, and then you wouldn't be able to cast those cards. But they're just controlling you. From what I've learned, they're just controlling the search. They're not replacing the search at all, and the search is tied to Hoarding Broodlord, which then lets you cast the cards they stole from you with Convoke. Crazy, right? That pretty much covers mostly everything here. With the creatures, we got a bunch. You got the Tutor Suite, you got the Imperial Seal, you got Demonic Tutor. You also got Natural Order, which is a card that nobody really plays. Only if you're playing Hulk decks. You can sacrifice your Elves of Deep Shadow, your Llanowar Elves, put a Protean Hulk into play, then, try to win the game from there. You got Slaughter Pacts because you're playing, like I said, a Protean Hulk deck. You might want to be able to put Protean Hulk in your hand. Maybe you have a way to discard it and you can reanimate it from there. Or after a ad nauseum, maybe you need a little extra mana. You can summon this pack for an Elvish Spirit Guide and give yourself a little extra boost there. Maybe you cast a Necropotent, so you took maybe about 30 damage off of it. Maybe you need to cast a Crop Rotation, which is next in line. Crop Rotation is actually a really good card in the deck. It is premier in putting Emergent Zone into play. That you can summon this pack for your Elvish Spirit Guide on the end step after a Necropotent comes down. And you can cast this. You can cast this Crop Rotation and search for your Emergent Zone, crack it, and then win the game at instant speed. However, if you do end up putting your Emergent Zone into play, if you put your Emergent Zone into hand off of a Necropotent's triggers, here's the thing: you can have Kodama out, and you can search for a random land. It doesn't matter what kind of land it is. As long as a land or a permanent enters the battlefield, you can pop your Emergent Zone down. And then you can crack it with the land that you fetch with Crop Rotation. And then you can start casting things at instant speed and start winning the game. Nature's Claim. Hot take. It's actually really not a hot take. There are times where your Necropotents for maybe like 30 or like a very high number can be unsuccessful. And there might be times where you need to destroy your own Necropotents. Maybe you just didn't get there. Maybe you don't have Kodama out. Maybe you don't have Emergent Zone to find. You might have to destroy your own Necropotents, and that's fine. This also destroys Breach, and that's also okay. I've been thinking about running Emerald Charm in place of this because it also serves the same function. It just doesn't gain you the 4 life, which can also save you sometimes when you go down to 3 off of a Necropotence. But Emerald Charm might work because it untaps some of your permanents, like Gaia's Cradle, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith. Might untap any random permanent that makes more than 1 mana. It could be very helpful there. Defense Grid, I actually want to comment on this. This card is actually insane with Kodama out because one of the tricks I've used before more recently is that I had a Lesser Master Core out and I sacrificed it to, what's that card called? Phyrexian Tower. I sacrificed it to Phyrexian Tower, and it has Persist, so it entered the battlefield and triggered Kodama, and then I put in a Defense Grid. And I have floating 2 black, and I had 3 mana available, which then let me cast my Ad Nauseam uncountered. Well, uninteracted with, because each spell costs 3 more to cast during my turn. I was also thinking about this on the end step, but then why would I do that on the end step? Because, you know, my opponent could interact on their end step. I also would be missing out on mana, which would suck. Got Skull Clamp here. It's an insane card. This is almost like a Clamp Storm deck because Tevesh makes all those throws. They could be considered useless if nobody's attacking Tevesh, but you can make use out of them by, you know, clamping them and drawing 2 cards on each throw that you've created. The most I've ever drawn off of the Skull Clamp is maybe about 8 cards in a turn. It's truly insane. And I would recommend anybody playing this deck to... This is an auto include. Skull Clamp is an auto include in this deck, and you should be playing it. I will take no further questions. Hey, so I hope you like the deck. The link for the deck can be found in the description below, as well as my other links. You can find, you can most definitely ask questions about this deck. I'm not too harsh about it. If you have any like concerns or anything about it, if you're wondering how or what it takes to play this deck, you can feel free to blow me up with questions in the comments below. Or if you want, you can visit the Discord and holler at me about any questions you got. You can comment on the Mox field as well. There's a bunch of avenues. If you want to, you know, shout me out on Twitter and ask me questions about the deck, or, you know, slide in my DMs. Catch you later.